John? Hear us? Yeah.
Good evening. Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Right. Recording, we're live. Welcome everyone to the March 7th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This being the first meeting out of 2 each month, we try to dedicate it to our plan of conservation and development. So for those of you who are here for that, great, we welcome you. If you're not, you're just going to have to sort of sit through it while we get through the agenda. So the first item on the agenda is the plan of conservation and development. And let me first actually introduce everyone. On Zoom, we've got Bob O'Connor Zoom joining us, John Wiskowski, who's our consultant for the PSCD. In person, we've got Bob Reinhardt, John Russo, Morgan, Andy Rubin, myself, Carol Snow Chair, Mike Bugda, and Jeff Downs, and our town planner, Aaron Mannix. Aaron, I don't think we have any legal notices to read.
No.
So we can jump right in. John, would you like to get us going with the POCD?
Sure. So good evening, everyone. For the record, I'm John Guskowski, principal with Tyche Planning and Policy Group. We've been working with the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff on updating the plan of conservation and development. Where we are this evening, hopefully everyone was distributed a copy of a document called Madison POCD 2023 Final Draft Public Hearing Version Working March 2024. This is basically the entire draft of the substance of the plan that we have developed over the last year plus. This is basically in its proposed final text format. There's a couple of elements that are still missing. First element that's missing is an executive summary. If you're looking at, and actually, should I share the screen just so I can run through it? Is that easier? Yeah, let's see. Okay, can people see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So again, this is the draft format, but the text and the substance are all basically ready to proceed. So table of contents, introduction, goals and core themes, natural environment, built environment, 7 policies for Madison, conclusions, and an implementation. The things that are missing from this are a variety of images. We're going to be, when we do a final layout, we're going to be putting various photographs and imagery around Madison and illustrative. The executive summary, which will be added at the end, is not what I would call a substantive section. The introduction is in place, that reviewing the statutory basis, regional plan of conservation and development, the history of the Madison plan of conservation and development, going through Madison's demographics and trends, the review of updating the process of the plan of conservation and development. Then we go into the section 2, goals and core themes, the vision statement, the paired core themes, vitality and connectivity, resilience and sustainability, and opportunity and growth. Then we have the sections on natural environment, where we sort of define what this is, some of the relevant plans and studies that contribute to the policies revolving the natural environment, maps, several maps, and the maps are going to be consolidated and updated. So right now, these are just placeholders. I would note that the maps are not policy documents. We don't reference the map saying, things will be built in this quadrant on this map or anything like that. So the maps are basically illustrative and informative. They're not policy statements. So we go through again the boards and commissions that have oversight over the natural environment, and then we do basically the same thing with the built environment. Again, definitions, documents that are relevant, studies, boards and commissions, and existing inventory of maps. And again, these are not policy documents, they're just illustrative, things like population density, housing types and locations, zones, and that sort of thing. And those are going to be swapped out. Again, the boards and commissions that have jurisdiction over built environment elements. Then comes the actual meat of the plan, is the 7 policies for Madison, built around the 3 goals that Bob and Carol helped us refine particularly. Then the 7 policies A through G. I won't read through them, but these are things that we've hashed out in great detail. None of this is obviously changing. This is in its final text proposal. And then we go through each policy and have the goals and action steps in each of the 7 policies. And then following the policies, goals, and recommendations, or action steps, I should say, we have a conclusions section, a statement about the manner in which the local plan aligns with the state and regional plans, the statement of compliance, and then we have the implementation section, which is basically a table. And this is probably the stuff that you're seeing for the first time, although obviously the policies and actions on the left column are taken from a different part of the plan that we've worked on. What we've added to this implementation table is a lead partner and a lead entity and partnering entities, because again, a plan is really only as good as it is able to be implemented. And so it's important to know for each action item who's responsible and who should be working on this, and as well as adding a priority. And so we've done this for all of the 7 policies and each action item under the policies. We worked on this with Aaron. And then that is essentially the substance of the plan. And what we would propose from this point would be for the commission to do another read through. And again, the majority of this you've seen several times, and we've sort of hashed through, particularly the policies and the action steps. I think the last thing for you folks to sort of hash through is the way that we've come forward with the lead entities and the partnering entities and priorities. We basically had 3 priority levels, because again, this is a 10-year plan. The priority levels being high priority, which is something that the task, the recommendation should be undertaken, not necessarily completed, but undertaken and started within the first few years 1 through 3 of the plan. A moderate priority would again then be years 4 through 6. Lower priority would be undertaken or really focused on in the out years of the plan, years 7 through 10. And then of course we have ongoing, because there are things that, continue to fund something or, monitor the conservation quality on these sorts of things that have to do with ongoing bases. So again, I think the goal, so the substance of the plan is basically all in place. The style of the plan, the final layout is still to be finalized. We got to add pictures, we got to finalize maps. We're going to do the executive summary, and we're going to do the final layout. But the meat of the plan is in place. And we think with your review over the next couple of weeks, that we could be ready to basically set a public hearing date for this. And statutorily, we have to basically set the public hearing date at least 65 days out, because we have to post a copy with the state, with the Office of Policy and Management for their review, with the town clerk, and with the COG. Each of those entities basically gets a copy for their review and for public availability before the hearing starts. And so essentially, we're proposing that this is the document we put forward with the caveats, obviously, that the final layout and final maps and things like that aren't in place, but all of the policies are. And then we proceed from there.
Questions and comments, reactions?
So are we going to get into any details of discussion on this tonight?
Do you want to?
That's really up to
It's up
you.
to
I
us.
think if you were ready, it wasn't meant to be pressure.
Okay.
There is time if you have comments tonight, fine. If you'd like the 2 weeks, to kind of give some feedback to John and I about anything you have in the, the entity or the priority, that's fine. Carol and I had talked of potential public hearing dates. If we looked at roughly 65 days from your next meeting of March 21st, that would get us to the first, well, it would be more than 65 days, but that would be the first meeting in June, where you could open a public hearing.
Was it June 6th?
That's our first meeting is June 6th, I believe.
I'm out of the country, so
June
that's
6th?
either good or bad for you all.
I think it's June 6th, let me say.
Yeah, I think.
Yes.
June is how long?
See.
So we're saying we have a final draft in 2 weeks?
Well, yeah, actually, John, I wanted to ask you about that
Yeah.
too. Is at what stage does final have to be final for us to hand it over, or for us to even, present it to the public? And I would think it
Yeah.
would be important to get the images and formatting and everything as cleaned up as possible we can.
Yeah, I mean, and that's stuff we could do. I think well, there's sort of two schools of thought about this. Is a polished draft, with all the pictures, with all the maps updated, with everything laid out and buttoned up, in advance of the public hearing, can tend to have portray the impression that this is a done deal and your comments don't necessarily mean that much. That's not necessarily the case. Certainly it's not. And it's not hard, even if it's in a nice final format, to swap words and change priorities and things like that. But it would tend to discourage the public from doing maybe too much monkeying. On the other hand, a document like this is clearly rougher around the edges. And I think I would be less worried that OPM or the COG or South Central COG would be put off by something like this, because they would be reading the substance anyway. They wouldn't necessarily need to review the pictures or the scale of the map or something like that, particularly when the maps aren't policy documents. But if you would prefer to move forward with something that at least looks complete, in a format that doesn't say, map to be replaced or something like that, we can certainly put that together in the next couple of weeks.
That would be great, because I think one thing, John, I found difficult about it is where page breaks are falling to, where, we have sections of, and especially with the new implementation tables where they're kind of broken up and be better, I think, if we could get those reformatted and aligned.
Okay, sure.
Put the image.
And maybe that requires putting images in.
So we should,
first.
yeah. And I mean, there's also, you can also, when we do the layout, have page or picture frames. And then, so we know where the pictures will go. If we don't have the perfect picture absolutely ready to go, that's something else we can do as part of the layout. But yeah, sure, certainly.
I may be an outlier here. The flow, the format doesn't make any sense to me. We've got all this fluff at the beginning. We've got like 30 pages of fluff. Why aren't we just coming in with, here's the executive summary, here's the policies, maybe a conclusions, and everything else should be like an appendix. It seems like there's just a lot of fluff for no reason.
Well, to a certain extent, I mean, I take your point, and actually, a couple of plans we did took that approach where they basically put the policy up front and made the demographic stuff an appendix. From a formatting standpoint, this attempts to, lay out, here's the vision, here's where we came from, here's who we are demographically, historically, here's how we got to this point, and then takes a look forward.
They care about what are the policies.
I agree.
What are people going to look at? They're going to look at the policies. Well, we have to bring this to the public to discuss. We've got 34 pages of something before we get to the policies. It's going to be a nightmare.
I agree. Get to the answers. People are,
Yeah,
I don't think they
that's-
want the build up. It's there for information if they want it on the back, but
Some of it we have had though.
But it's in it. It's in the
I think you should
document.
keep it. It's all important.
Yeah.
But I
but
think
maybe
to create
reorder.
that reorganization of the document, where you can take some of the stuff in the first part where it says, here's the vision, here's what we're thinking, an executive summary of, we're a small town, we're a big town, whatever it might be.
Well,
But reference the details in the back so you can slide into it.
The executive summary could certainly have the vision and the 7 policies.
Yes.
That would be up front. That would be essentially on page 1.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do it that way, because and so in that sense, we could draft the executive summary right now.
So.
I don't know if that's yeah.
Go into the details on the policies, and again, keep the rest of the information. If somebody wants to go reference it, it's there, it's in the document, but it's not up front.
Let me suggest that, there may be a good reason to provide context. Maybe it could be shortened a little bit, but if people don't want to read it or read it closely, they can pretty quickly go past it. It seems to me that I would want people to read the context to figure out that those policies didn't come from some, special interest coming out of nowhere, making suggestions. Since I'm talking, let me say something else. I wonder if it would not be useful to have some kind of an informal listening session or hearing, or giving the public an opportunity to raise issues before doing the formal public hearing. This idea is not entirely original with me. I was talking with one of our elected officials who thought it might be a good idea to give, because, rumors get out about this stuff and how do you interpret this and that? And it can really help to give people an opportunity, now that there is a document they can actually read, to say, well, I'm concerned, is it true that so-and-so? And I'm just throwing that out. I think it would be useful.
Have you ever done that, John?
Bob, could you explain specifically what you envision?
What I envision is kind of a situation where you or someone would say, okay, here's the document, give some context, is that, look, the first 30 pages talks about where we are, that we're losing population and so, and then we try to put it together with how do we move forward? Here's a number of policies. Have you heard weird stuff about this? Do you have any questions?
Okay, all right, so a pre-public hearing
Hearing
session?
opportunity for people to say, gee, they've heard this weird thing, or they haven't, or it's the public hearing is a formal event, and this might give an opportunity. I know the housing folks have been doing this or are doing it.
Yeah,
So,
well,
to your
yeah,
point, I think Peggy would be happy if we did something like that, but it might be as simple as just putting a notice or even an article in the paper. I don't know, Aaron, if this is something that can be done, saying, hey, we've got 3 more public meetings, not official public hearings, but public meetings before we will be presenting this more formally. And, encourage people to come to those, because that's an opportunity.
Well, so I guess there's a couple things. Once you post the draft for a public hearing, it's understood that the commission's not making changes to it before the public hearing, correct? So
that's right, yeah.
if you're gonna set a public hearing and then you're gonna hold like an information session,
Yeah.
it would really just be to share information, but not to really collect the formal feedback on that would be coming through at the public hearing portion that you would then consider if you're making any changes to it.
Yeah, otherwise you're opening the door back over. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a public hearing too early,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And I think, Bob, that there's no reason other than, the fact that we're already a little bit overdue to update, that you couldn't have multiple public hearings. It doesn't need to be sort of one and done. And there could be, you could seek to extend that to make sure that people have the opportunity to see this. But I think Aaron is right that I mean, kind of what you're describing is something between sort of a public information session and a public hearing, which is what hopefully what we're aiming towards.
What if it was something, if it wasn't a meeting, if it was more of like a highlights of what the plan will entail? So we're posting that, we're gonna move forward with this plan. Here are some, the main points or the main focus that's also available, as like the quick reference or something to kind of get that out there to people so they can
I guess I'm struggling a
see
bit,
that ahead.
Bob, with what's the objective of this informal meeting? Is it to just answer questions that people might have about it?
Just to give,
I know I'm far from the microphone. I was asking, what's the objective of this informal meeting? Is it to answer questions that people might have? Which we can do at any one of our sessions, right? We post it. So if you have questions come, we can answer them. And I'm thinking we probably do that when it's posted within that 65-day period, have information sessions. If you have questions before the formal hearing, we're here. Ask the expert kind of thing.
The objective is to, yeah, objective is to give people an opportunity to voice their concerns, to learn about it before we have, quote, the big event, the public hearing.
All right. So,
That's
Aaron,
what
it's
we do.
possible, once we
But
don't plan
don't
on changing it.
snowball into, yeah.
No, I watched the affordable housing session.
well, that's different.
Right,
That's
but-
totally
but no, I'm
different.
saying
That's an
we're
adopted
done.
plan.
We come to the
Just a
the draft is done.
Conversation.
Final draft, it's published. 65 days from there, we're gonna have our formal hearing, public hearing.
But at any time,
But in between then,
yeah,
we hold an information section. Says if you've read it now, it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If you've read it and you have questions, we're here to clarify and ask before the formal meeting, so we don't get as many questions, or we can help people get to a deeper understanding. We're not changing it unless it's something completely we missed, which would be fundamental screw up in our work.
well,
Yeah,
there will be a presentation of the plan, right? Like John, for the hearing.
yeah,
We're gonna
right, sure. We'll do a
have
formal,
That's the
presentation.
hearing, right?
I don't know that we would want to have, do you want to prepare that early and have that available? I don't know.
That's a,
I mean, I know there's statutory guidelines, and I think that the perspective of perhaps, members of the board is to have multiple opportunities for public comment. But my understanding also of once you post this, that is in invitation to receive public comment through our office, correct? That can be submitted for
right. So I mean,
feedback.
people can submit testimony or feedback or whatever. That will all be formally received, excuse me, at the public hearing. I mean, people can do it in advance, but
Right.
the sort of response element really shouldn't happen until the public hearing, because then that way we can be sure that people would know that it's heard. So if you have these free discussions, once you've sort of posted it for public hearing, then someone could say, oh yeah, no, you forgot about this, this demographic or this park or this endangered species or something. And we say, oh, okay, yeah, good. We'll change that. And then you would almost need to, when you have your public hearing, sort of restate all of those things so that it's on the record and people are aware of what's being said.
Or you do it before you post a public hearing.
what we'd end up
Right.
having
Well,
is
that's the other thing.
to aggregate all the information from and present it at the final public hearing. I get it.
Right. If there's a desire from the commission to have a public information session
We get
about the plan ahead of, I mean, that's, and if anybody were here for the affordable housing plan, it was a full presentation to the board, to planning and zoning. It allowed for comments. It doesn't have to end that evening. But you would, I guess, if you wanted to solicit, well, you've been soliciting comments this entire time at all of your meetings, but if you wanted to have another meeting that specifically went through where you are, then
And as we
I
get
would
closer
think
to
you
the
would
final
have to do that before posting the public hearing, or for, setting the public hearing. Otherwise, it's gonna get convoluted and feel like the public hearing. I guess that's for the commission to kind of weigh in
mull
how,
over.
yeah. what
First,
are-
I'd
what
like
are
to go
your
back to your
thoughts?
points about restructuring it. And John, maybe you could give us a little feedback about what POCDs look like, you know, for other communities, other municipalities. Do you just cut to the chase right at the start and then have, you know, sort of backup information?
That's I've done one or two of those. And actually, I think actually one affordable housing plan, a community wanted just the goals and policies up front and then put all the demographics in the appendix. Um, you know, it's a little bit tough to answer because there's a little bit of sort of you know, pride of authorship in this, or sort of, you know, that if I very much understand the desire to sort of lead with the policies. Like, here's our plan. Here are the seven policies, and then relegate everything to the appendix. My personal belief is that there's value in some of the lead up, some of the description of the demographics, some of the description of what a plan is and why we have to do this and how does this relate to the state or the region. That's valuable as part of the narrative structure. And putting it in the appendix obviously gets to the point faster. But if you put something like that in the appendix, that's a 100% invitation to never read it.
That's right.
As you know, I suppose some you know, very curious, diligent residents may say, huh, where did that policy come from? Or why are they weighing in on this? And then look back in the appendix and say, oh, well, the state mandates that you have to consider wastewater or something like that. But you know, this is as much as it is a policy document, it's also a little bit of a story of how we got here and why we're ending up on these conclusions. But you know, this is ultimately your plan, and if what you would like is, you know, policies up front, appendices in the back, and descriptions in the back, that's fine. I think that, yeah.
There's no precedent either way, is what you're saying, in that it's pretty much.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, there are things you have to cover statutorily, but exactly how you present it, there's no rules, really.
You could put a note in there. You said you go directly to plans and policies, go to page 26.
Well, you can make the PDF also that you can click directly on the sections and bring you, you know, link you to the
Just skip
sections.
through the,
But I,
the table of contents.
I do like the idea of including some of that in the executive summary, so you're getting some meat
Yes,
up
yeah.
front.
There's the meat. And how?
But I'd love that compromise to still keep the other stuff behind it in order. I guess that's what I
The
thought.
document is not going to be used as a storybook. It's going to be used, somebody wants to go in and see what is the policy. And that should be the focus here. And if they have questions on that policy, then either we're referencing the appendix, or they can go to the appendix and find it. It's not like I want to read through everything to find out, oh, maybe it's here or maybe it's there. I want to know what the policy is. I want to know how it's going to impact what I want to
But the
do.
context gives you the reasoning and the background to why the policy.
34 pages of
I think
context.
so.
Well, in the,
It doesn't, and I understand what you're saying, and I agree, I think it's too much, because there's a lot of talk about changes in the population. The change in the population is based on data from 2020, which is really not relevant given COVID and the changes that have occurred since, so we're not actually using the data set that shows that the population of Madison is continuously declining. I don't know what the population is now, but everything, my gut is that has not declined in the last couple of years.
Maybe some of that song, you can make that an appendix.
So that data is there, there's data that's good. But a lot of, there are 4 or 5 pages on existing boards and commissions.
That should be the.
That's, we can push that in the back, just we can tighten it up a little bit, I think. And it may not be an executive summary, it might simply be a tightening up of the front where some of the, we call it extraneous information, but it's not. But some of the additional color that's added to it can be better suited separately. If you really want to know what all of the documents and plans and what surveys and assessments that there over the last 10 years, as we say, and there's one missing it. But you can go there and look for it, but you can reference, a bunch was done and we based our work on that.
But you can even say that in the executive summary.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an
And then
executive
back it
summary, it
up
could just
to
be
the-
a shorter lead-in, which gets to the key points that we're trying to make. I mean, we don't have any information on the number of people that come in the summer, which is a big deal. There's a line in there about how the economy of Madison uses an illustration. Financial institutions, banks and realtors on Main Street and restaurants struggle to, so I don't get that connected to anything else. So it's actually, when I read it this time, I know there's more work to come. When I read it through, I got a little more confused than I was as to how we come up with policies. And I think we need to get that first half. I'm probably the closest you have, or some of the others here, the closest you have to what the people are gonna see it for the first time, because I didn't write it. I've been reading it for a couple of months, but I didn't write it. When I read it, I get a little confused. I understand how we came up with policies through our conversations. The first parts of the chapter of the book don't really explain it. And I think we're leading us into more questions than answers. I like a tight, tell them what you're gonna tell them what you told them kind of story. We can put that in the beginning, it's just editing, and in keeping the important stuff and putting it in the back for the reference, so you can't lose it, you have to have it. But I think it muddies the stories. I wouldn't go as far as just sticking all in the appendix, I think there's value there. But I think we can get.
Andy,
I agree. I'm probably newer than you,
Yes.
and I
That's why I had
nothing
my
to do with any of writing of it. And I read it, and I am going to be blunt, I read it twice. And I read it twice as a sense of obligation. I struggled to read through this, understand it, how it flow. I didn't get it. It was hard to digest. Just again, be open and honest with the record about it. Just it was. I feel that other people are going to have the same struggle, and I'm a big believer in, as I always say, get to the answer. That's what people want to read. The information's back there. You do have to sum it up from within an executive summary to help them frame it, but then get to the policies, and then all the other stuff is supporting material. It's not superfluous, it's supporting. You have to digest it as you want. But otherwise, I think people are going to struggle. The average person is going to struggle reading it. Then it's too long.
you read the 2013.
No. I struggle getting through this.
And what they did, I was just gonna say, is that they put, the action items and the recommendations as a separate section. I mean, originally they were all separate PDFs each chapter, but all in one at the end. So if you're using it, you tend to just go straight to that.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
when
so
it's
you use it,
online, it's
yeah.
really easy to do.
Yeah, sure.
But if we create a document, we can either, as Erin, as you said, with the table of contents, you can just link, I mean, that's how our regulations work too. I'm kind of used to that, and maybe because I'm from an academic environment, I don't mind getting the history and the context first, sort of getting an overview and then zooming in on the specifics, but I also have no problem with switching it around. I think that works too. Yeah.
Well, a few things. Number one, I agree with you on the history and the context. I think it makes it more readable, sure. Always can be typed up, but you need something to ease into it. Right? If it's strictly policies and actions right off the bat, it's just not easy reading. So I like the history and the context, one. Number two, on the population issue, John, do we have updated numbers for that? Because that seems fundamental to the entire plan and the entire outlook.
We would have, I have to check to see where we are with the American Community Survey, but the last, the last 100% count survey is the 2020 numbers.
So
okay.
Could I just inject
Sure.
one thing on that will demographics? And I was talking to Carol before the meeting. We have all that demographics information, but did we truly use any of that demographic information doing any of the policy plan? Did we create any policies based on that?
Yes,
Housing. That's one thing I thought a lot about, was how it's shifting and kind of doing a barbell thing. Was one of the ones.
Well, you're right. There's
But
that.
no direct like this, if this and that kind of
Yeah.
statement.
It's not, no, and that's correlation. So to me, that could be in the executive summary then, you know.
Exactly. That's
the executive summary, right?
But as a reader, think about the next 10 years, what's more important? Population trends for the town. I mean, imagine two scenarios, one where it grows by 50%, another where it declines by 20. Each in entirely different directions. So what we've got is what we've got. So even if it didn't specifically drive any policies, it's super important for the project.
But is it important to have it in this document
First.
because it actually, you know, it's out of date as soon as you put it in?
Well, so I'm saying, if it's completely out of date, then we gotta reconsider it, and try to make it as up to date as you can.
That's different.
It's different, but anyway, but the population obviously matters for planning and zoning.
Yeah.
Probably should, but the other last thing is, in terms of readability, I think it's pretty good, right? Number one, but number two, the affordable housing document, I thought it was very readable. So when I started into that, it was easy to get through, it was kind of long, but it's interesting. Even for somebody who's not necessarily specializing in that area. So I think that might be sort of the model that we want to use, and I think what we've got includes a lot of that type of writing. So.
Well, you're lucky to have the same consultant, so.
That's
at least
not a
you have
coincidence.
Oh, okay, that's what, anyway, that's what I'm saying is, I'm maybe a little more satisfied and impressed with the overall product so far. More editing is always better, but I think it's okay, better than okay.
And with the strategic plan, we took the attitude that if you're 80% comfortable with it, we're going with it. So keep that in mind too. We're not all going to be 100% super excited. So where does that lead us? Does anyone want to take a try at restructuring, or John, is that something you would do?
I think what I would offer first would be to see if we can put together a relatively strong, concise executive summary that gets at some of the key goals and policies up front, and some of the whys up front, and to see if that, you know, maybe scratches the itch of let's get right into it from some of the commissioners. And then doesn't necessarily abandon or relegate the narrative components to an appendix.
That sounds good to me. Everybody okay with that?
Right.
I did.
Good idea.
Summary will cure everything.
And I guess procedurally, Madam Chair, do you want to have that in draft form, or should we attempt this while we also do a sort of a final layout, which is the other element of this is, you know, if we were going to proceed where we started, could we do a final layout, and then the commission decides, nope, let's invert the entire order of this.
Yeah, but if we get to a more final product, I think we might be happier with that more final.
Okay,
product.
well, and then yeah, some folks might be less likely to monkey with it, as I said.
I'm not sure. I would say I think the executive summary is really important at this point, and we can't wait till the very end to write it. I think we can kind of steer how the document shapes up by it. You know, and we can summarize things in the executive summary that maybe we don't have to go into so much detail about them. We can trim them up a little bit once we see that.
Yeah,
That
it's good. You can
sort of
just,
opening.
for additional information, read on, if not, skip page
Yeah,
45 for
Yeah.
section 7.
and again, the table of contents, and I would hope that the table of contents can be clicked on and you can get
Yeah,
to.
of course.
Yeah.
What kind of time frame do you want to put
I
on
th-
this
I think we could.
summary?
Oh, who are you asking?
You.
We can have an executive summary, and I think we can have a pretty good setup for the layout by your next meeting within 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's great.
And it may, I will say, you know, Aaron and everybody, if we want to have something that looks as polished as possible, I think we're going to need to sort of crowdsource great photos and things like that.
I can do that.
Yeah, but I think, and Zoe is with us, as well. Zoe is doing, a lot of our mapping work. I would think that we're probably within 2 weeks worth of effort to kind of bring the maps to a relatively final shape. And the maps, and this is something we struggled with. We had Aaron and Zoe and I had a fairly long conversation earlier this week about the problem is we love the landscape layout of the plan because it works perfectly on a computer screen when you're reading it. But unfortunately, your dang town is portrait oriented. And that makes for a very difficult mapping view inside a page of the document. So I think something that we might do is put in some sort of small maps, essentially as illustrations, that are not meant to be scrutinized too closely or zoomed. They're meant to be illustrative, and then have a separate map appendix that can better reflect the oblong nature of Madison. So, fair warning, that's probably how we'll look to format that section.
Quick comment on the maps, they don't show up well in black and white. I print everything in black and white, you can't say everything's color coded, the colors are too close. On the,
Right.
I'm not sure if you can fix that or not, just a comment.
Yeah.
Possible.
It's I guess, well, we look to you guys on how critical that is. I suppose that Zoe could, instead of color coding things, do cross hatching and things like that for a dedicated black and white layer. But I think, for the most part, this document is going to live on a website and in PDF format.
All right, that's fine.
And also, John, if the resolution is good enough, I think we can always zoom in and
Yeah.
not worry.
yeah.
I was thinking of having a couple of Madisons per horizontal format page, and you could just zoom in if you want to.
Yeah, we talked about that, and there's also going to be several maps that are basically just I-95 south, so it's sort of the shoreline area that fits a landscape better. But anyway, so we're struggling a little bit with the maps. That's why you didn't see it in final format. But if I'm seeing nods from Zoe, I think we can probably have the maps as part of the final layout and the executive summary by your next meeting. And so I would ask, in the meantime, that you all focus on the meat of this, particularly the implementation guide. So we want your feedback on, and be ready for the discussion on, should this be a higher priority? Should some other group be working on this? So basically those right-hand 2 columns in the implementation guide.
You're ready now. What would you prefer, I guess?
I'm
I don't
asking
know.
how you want to handle it.
I don't know that everybody else is ready.
Can you?
Do you want to receive them in just comments from commissioners and then weed through them for the draft?
Yeah, I mean, if Bob is comfortable doing track changes.
It's
And
not
sending it
editing, it's not editing or wordsmithing or things like that. It's a question on the basic approach on the invitation table. And then also, and the other question is then with that, how do you want to handle it? And the other one is within section 5 of the policies. I apologize, the first time I had a chance to really look at them all as they've been rewritten. And I have some that are, I have questions on some of them, whether we want to include it, word it as it is worded, if it weakens or strengthens the position that policy is there. And there are a number of duplications in the policy strategy, some of the strategies, some of the goals, and some of the sub goals, the actions that we follow. So there's some duplication there. And we talked a lot in the past about how some of these are going to change. And having now seeing the final version of it, I have a question on whether we want to state it exactly like that. That's what our intention is. So I can do that however you want. We do it now. We can meet. I can meet with John and go through it. Meet with you. You all haven't had a chance to read it, so it may just be.
I guess one of the questions I have is about the implementation table. You have comments about the approach.
Yes.
What's that?
I only read the first one because that was enough for me to get a sense of what my concern was. The policies and actions, we have the policy, which is essentially the strategy we're pursuing. We have the number one, so policy A number one. Number one is stated as essentially a goal, create a updated downtown development plan, create a multimodal transportation master plan, update, stuff like that. Those are specific goals we can measure. Underneath that, we had some actions we captured, which we thought, for the most part, are good and important, that there were still actions that would be part of the overall building out of how to achieve the goal. So if the goal is updated downtown development plan, we had 3 things we wanted to make sure are in there, but there may be 20 other things that were responsible for updating the plan, like. So when I go through this, we have an owner for the goal. And then we have owners for the actions, and the owners for the actions are different and don't overlap all the time with the owner of the goal. So I'll go by numbers. Policy A, 1AC, the owner of C is not reflected in the owner of 1. They can go off and do their own thing, independent of what the person responsible for delivering the updated downtown development plan is doing. Complete conflict could occur. Not always, but it could. It's not good.
So the owner of the goal should be a supporting entity in.
That's a different part. That's one of the things. The other part is that you have actions having a higher priority than the goal itself. So you're sending someone off to balance commercial and residential requirements before the updated downtown development plan is being worked on. The balancing commercial and residential requirements will be completed before the goal it's assigned to is actually started. Can't do that. Okay.
That's fair.
So I'm looking at actions shouldn't have prioritization. I first started this was this afternoon. The action shouldn't have prioritization. That's the responsibility of the owner of the goal. I understand the need to give the goals prioritization, but I wouldn't put them in terms of years. When it should work. Say it's your job, medium priority, get to when you can. It's got to be done by the state. You have time this weekend, you want to work on it next week, go for it.
It is easier to set
I
for
mean,
just the
long.
goals. It is challenging to get them all.
I know, because it's not a project
doesn't-
plan. Put a project plan together, then you have the exact dates. But that's the responsibility of the owner of the goal. Achieve this goal. You've got, we don't want to say 10 years, this goal has to get done in the first 3 years, otherwise nothing else is going to happen or get done. And so go for it. What do you need? That to me then can really drives. No one owns the actions. You know, the actions are assigned based on the goal. That's my primary.
Would you want to keep the actions in the implementation table? Or just put timelines for the goals?
Back and forth, I was almost thinking, they're in the document and the owner will see them. We were saying, look, we as a commission think these 3 points are so important. We're going to make sure that you see them. So when you're doing this and we're reviewing it, it better be there. But otherwise, it's going to be those 3 things they do. Give them their kind of boss. So we say, if you're riding a horse, give the horse its head so it can find its way down the mountain. Don't tell them what to do. Just say, go down the mountain. You know how to do it. Figure it out. I'm not a micromanager.
Not at all.
Get people that can do this and let them do it.
Well, yes, but there should be an overall owner of the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Their job is to finish it.
Yeah.
Or do you put timelines on the actions and the overall goal?
I would say on the goals itself, unless some of the actions are so critical, you just want to get them done.
Well, some of them are.
Yeah, I know. Maybe they should be pulled out. I don't know.
John, do you usually break them up?
What's that?
I was gonna, do you usually break them up with the overarching policy and the timelines for the goals as well? Or the actions?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to answer that specifically because I think the way that we restructured this specifically is a little bit different from how I sort of do the recommendations and the specific actions. Where that it's they're a little bit
They're big.
they're big, and the actions tend to be very specific, and we do have. So I was thinking, to try to answer this, that it might be easier to have timeframes for the, and Bob, I want to use your phrasing. What's the finest grain? What do you call those?
Strategy for the policy, goals for the numbers, and actions for the ABCs.
Actions. Okay. So that that maybe it makes more sense to have each of the actions with a time frame, because then each of those, because again, so like implementing solutions for septic and wastewater is a clear action, and that's that has so there should be a discrete set of responsibilities and time frame for that, but then maybe the each of those sub actions in support of the broader strategy. Maybe the strategy doesn't need the time frame.
The number one, the
There's
update
nothing
to
on
downtown
goal.
development doesn't need an actual date. That's
I'd
may
like
take
that
10
better.
years. But these actions have to get done by this time frame. Then the assignment to the owner of the goal would be give us a draft or come up with your other actions and lay out your plan. I can see that, because then you're.
And so then each of those is built in ultimately towards, by the end of the 10 years, each of these large strategies will have been attacked.
These three things are really important. You gotta get these done in this time frame. And at the same time, build out the whole achievement of that goal, which is the multimodal transportation master plan is gonna take 10 years.
I think I would like that better too.
Okay,
To delete that.
Consider dependencies, right?
Yeah.
I actually
well,
thought
that's
about
that's
that.
part of it too. There are within the actions, some of the actions and some of the goals are duplicative in some way of other actions. There's one that had to do with acquiring, basically like acquiring land for some reason, but it's not in the open space plan. So it's just some group going out buying land, but then it's spoken to again later on as part of a holistic approach. We need to figure out how to connect
I
those.
think you're referring to the flood one.
I can go through.
We
it.
talked about that one day.
There's a couple like that, where it's
Yeah,
just safe support, we save support again, but we're giving it to different people to do it. So we just get stuff like that.
Well, yeah, so that would be helpful to hear your feedback and to see if it is the right, because I may be looking at this in a totally different way that you are.
So here, so
As
it's
far
on,
as-
policy A, multiple update and beach and rec plan. Item D, include consideration of active recreation opportunities as part of land acquisition process. Okay. Policy B, enhance connection to nature. Number 3 is develop a formal open space plan. A is develop a land acquisition strategy for open space and community facilities. Saying the same thing, but it's in two different things, and you have two different numbers. So you've got two different groups chasing more or less the same thing, which is both wasteful and could be in conflict. So we need to, it's hard, I know, because it's important. Maybe it's a pointer, but we have to make sure that one person's working. And only one person's responsible for getting.
I agree.
So, Bob, would you be willing to take a whack at it and send your comments to Aaron and
Okay, I just wanted to
John?
give the gist of what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I'll put these all in track changes and send them.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
no,
why I sent
track
the Word
changes and then
document.
comments, because I'll
Separate
need
for
that to
everybody?
kind of point.
That'd be great.
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. John Guskowski, are you feeling comfortable with where we're headed in the next couple weeks?
Well, that's the wrong question, Carol, but
I want to hear that you are.
we'll get it done. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so well, and I think my hope, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say my first reaction to this version was, yay, we are making real progress, and it's so nice to see it all come together.
Yeah, John, this is same, I say the same thing, it's great. It's a lot easier to go here, it's not gonna have to.
I didn't
see it
really
all.
get a lot of that.
I know, I want to make sure we said that.
And
Yeah,
that's why
thank
we
you.
should positive feedback there. But no, it's really good. It's all here. Now you can see how it all knits together. And now it's that much easier to kind of get to that next level where.
Okay, yeah, no, so I think, yeah, I think the hopefully some of the changes, at least Bob, that you're pointing to are things that won't upend formatting, you know, it's some wordsmithing, it's removal of things, so I think yeah. I think we're on the right track. So we'll have an executive summary and a layout for you guys to see at your next meeting.
Super, thank you. And thank you, Zoe. For the maps. Any other comments? Any other thoughts?
No problem. They will look even better than what is currently there.
I'm not wild about that magenta either, but never mind. Great. All right, is that it for the POCD for tonight?
I think it's
tonight.
all good. I like what Bob said.
Comment?
One more comment.
You stepped on my line. I think it's a great work. Really, I think it reads very well, and I'm more interested in the content. I think all the content's there. It's been, I think, since March a year ago. And I'm just impressed that you've been willing to make some changes. It's easy to not change anything and just say it's done, but I've seen public input and I've seen the changes being made in the document. So I think now it really reflects everything I heard from the public at the visioning sessions. And I'm especially, we're all happy you put in something about scenic resources and vistas, that's in there. And we're all very happy farms are going to be protected. That's in the implementation on page 50. It doesn't have to be a goal, I guess, as long as it's in the implementation. And that makes it comport not only with what people in town want, but with the state requirements to consider ag. So I'm just very pleased the way it's turned out and all the iterations. One comment on population I didn't mean to make, but it really is important in long-term planning. Population in Madison peaked 9 years ago, and people find that stunning to hear that. But when you consider the population in the entire Northeast, it has been dropping as people migrate. And in fact, you consider in all developing countries around the world, population is stagnant. So while not for this document, I'm glad you brought it up, because as you're thinking about Madison and possibly empty office buildings and changes, downsizing in homes and empty homes. It's important to keep that in mind when we're planning down the road. I mean, that probably is the most important thing. Is the population really going to drop, as they're saying? But I just wanted to say, I think this reflects everything that I heard from all the visioning sessions, and that's the point. So it's fabulous.
Thanks for that feedback, and thanks for all your interest.
Oh, by the way, I think there's been plenty of time for public input. I appreciate.
Oh, well, that's good to hear from you.
I appreciate.
At your standard.
I appreciate Bob saying, no, you're right. Sometimes the public hearing, if it's on an application, it's almost too late. But in this case, public hearing's different. It's after 12 months of meetings.
It's more like 16 months.
16 months.
But who's counting?
Sorry, I missed the first 4. No, I think everybody in town is aware.
Good.
The crowds are dwindling. I think people are pretty satisfied.
Hope so. Great, thanks. Okay.
I think everyone remembers how young and handsome I was at the beginning of this process.
You were here, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
All right. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank
Great,
you.
super.
Thanks, John, Zoe.
Sorry.
All right, next on our agenda is an informal discussion about 6 Opening Hill Road and Indigo Trail, map 70, lot 11, map 70, lot 114. This is the Hall Tremaine Foundation Incorporated request for information discussion of philanthropic and educational use of the property pursuant to sections 34 or 3.4C and 5.4A. So thank you all for wading through P O C D.
Could, Attorney McKeon, could we just verify, is there anyone else aside from, let's see, Michelle, Sarah, Mike, do you have anyone else in your group joining us that I should promote?
No, I think people may want to be available to answer questions, but the majority of the speaking is going to come from Michelle. I was just about to introduce her, and Mike Ott is the site engineer for the site. And, you know, he's available too, although I think tonight's discussion is not so much engineering or really legal. Although we let me introduce myself, I guess, for the record. Chris McKeon. My law office is in New Haven at 900 Chapel Street. I also am a resident of town. I live at 31 Hotchkiss Lane. The Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation contacted me, God, it's almost a year ago, about this project. And it really is a different and exciting project in my mind. Haven't seen anything like it in the number of years that I've worked on land use matters in town. And for that reason, we asked for this pre-application discussion, among other reasons, namely getting your feedback and that of the community. But I want to introduce and let Michelle take over. Michelle is the president of the foundation for the last 10 years. She's been in philanthropy for the last 20 years. And before that, she was in government as the director of energy policy for the city of Philadelphia. She's got a really interesting background, and the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, for me, is really a sleeper. This property, I've driven by it so much over the last 25 years living in town, and what has gone on at that property over through history really is eye-opening. It certainly was to me. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Michelle.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I'm going to do a little screen sharing, but I just want to say thank you all for giving us some of your time. We are really trying to understand how to be good neighbors and come in and think about philanthropic uses on a really architecturally significant property. So with that,
John, I just want to interrupt for a second, say, is there any way to increase your volume?
you know what, I think it usually takes a second and then the volume increases, like there's
Okay,
a little lag. Is it a little better now even?
Yes.
Hopefully, yeah, sorry for the lag there. But let me just introduce the foundation a little bit. Then I want to show you a timeline of the property and then some of the sort of envisioned uses. And just so you know, we sent out a package that had a lot of this information to the 23 neighbors who are in with like a 500-foot radius. So we've been trying to do some of our own informal outreach, just like you were talking before with your meeting, like how do you get some of this upfront feedback? And so let me just say a little bit about the foundation. It's a 40-year-old family foundation. The staff is professional staff, but the board is all family. It's 7 branches of the Tremaine family. And it's currently comprised of 2nd and 3rd generation family members. Sarah Tremaine is a founding director. She's a 2nd generation member. She has a lot of early experiences going to her grandfather and step-grandmother's home on 6 Opening Hill Road. And our 3rd generation members were really kids running around this property. So there is this intergenerational passion and commitment to bringing this property back to life. The foundation is intended to operate in perpetuity. We're kind of categorized as a medium-sized foundation. Our assets hover between 80, 90, 100 million, and we distribute about 5% of our net asset value annually, so around 4 million in grant making. in the area of education, specifically learning differences. So we have a huge lens on accessibility and inclusion, on environment, and we'll talk a little bit about how the goals for the property align with that lens. And we have been core funders from the very beginning of sustainable CT. So I think that was even referenced in the plan you were just talking about. And then in the arts, and there is a huge art legacy here, and I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about that. And we've been primarily a grant making foundation, private foundation. And this is the first time we've owned property where we are considering how we could program philanthropic uses that align with this 40-year grant making history. And the art itself, I mean, Emily and Burton Tremaine Sr. were premier collectors of contemporary art in America. They amassed in the sort of earlier, but largely in the post-World War II period, one of the largest and most prestigious collections of contemporary art in America, and really kind of nationally and internationally renowned on that. So at the end of their lives, they lived with this art, and I'm going to show you some images from the property where they are living with the art and the artist, I think, that you will recognize. But near the ends of their lives, they determined that they didn't want to donate their collection to museums where it would probably end up in storage. They really wanted art and people who are going to be living with art. So they ended up auctioning most of their significant pieces, and they bought early, and I think even they were surprised at the escalation in value. So at the end of their lives, there were 2 Christie's auctions, and Emily Hall Tremaine, the half of the proceeds from those auctions went to endow the foundation. That's how we got our endowment. So we are clearly rooted in the arts. And so let me just take you through that quick history of the property. Do you see the timeline?
Yes.
On the street, okay. So you all may know this already, but I mean, it was really the colonial part of the house was built in the 1720s, and the barn came online in like 1780. The Wileys, Philip Wiley, the author, and his wife Sally at that time were the first owners there, and they started doing some additions. And it was in the Wileys got divorced, and Burton Tremaine Sr. married Sally. And they were together in the like late 30s, early 40s. And on their divorce, the property went to Burton. And they had started working with an architect of significance, Alberta Pfeiffer, in doing some upgrades during their time. But then when Burton met Emily and married Emily, this is the period where the significant historical significance comes into the property. They were friends with Philip Johnson, who really had recently completed the glass house in New Canaan. And so he started doing additions to the colonial house there. So the barn became the playhouse, and it really became this gallery-like space for the Tremaine art collection. He added the pool, the glass pavilion, and that beautiful sculptured wall is almost a replica of the wall Philip Johnson designed in 1954 for the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And then added this entry cube that I'll show you a little bit later. So the property was in the Tremaine family for more than 50 years. And then over here, when Emily and Burton, at the end of their lives, when they have passed, Burton Tremaine Jr. subdivided it was a 76-acre property at the time. The parcel now is 6 acres with the house and the barn. And the subdivision happened, and I love this little tidbit for neighbors who don't know. Kachina Way and Indigo Trail, the names of those came from the names of the sailboats of Burton. I don't know, Sarah, I don't know if it was your grandfather and your father's sailboats, or if they were both your grandfather's sailboats, but the names of those roads came from that. So you have a little bit of Tremaine history now, if you didn't know that. And then in 1994, the Bears purchased the property. It was in their ownership for quite some time. And then in 2005, actually, it went under Peyton Patterson in sole ownership around 2005. We know it fell into disrepair. Bank of America foreclosed on the property, and it has some significant, damage at this point. Like it's going to take a lot to bring it back online, but you can't find a family who's more committed to bringing this property back to the architectural sort of gem that it was. And then so the foundation acquired it in 2023, and we've been trying to do some visioning and since then. And we've learned that the farm is what they called it. It was a place where Emily and Burton really lived with their art. It had contemplative spaces, elements of discovery as you walked through the property, coming across art and sculpture in the landscape. And I talked a little bit about the architectural significance, not only Alberta Pfeiffer and Philip Johnson, but a lighting designer, if anyone's a historian there, Richard Kelly. And there's a little bit of that captured in this image over here. And this was the barn, which became the glass barn, really, that Philip Johnson notion of the glass house. He removed that main wall, and it's now the one wall of the barn is all glass. And it is that sense of modernist architecture design where you tend to blend indoor space with outdoor space. So this notion of the building and the uses and the kind of rich texture of living with the art also extends out into the landscape. But this was the barn. This was featured in Vogue magazine in 1969. And you can see some of the artists listed on the left. And many of those artists were not known. They were not known. O'Keeffe, Rosenquist, Oldenburg with the 7-Up, the iconic 7-Up. These folks just weren't known at the time, but here in the barn in Madison, the Tremaines were living with this art. Mark Rothko, Andy Warhol in the glass pavilion, Warhol and Jasper Johns in the dining room, painted china red. This was all that was going on, and it extended out into the landscape where you could find a Lichtenstein and a Mary Callery and others of artists of great significance into the landscape. And so today we're kind of looking at what is most important, and we have experts on our side. Stover Jenkins is an architect who wrote the book, The Houses of Philip Johnson. He has been a guide to us. So we're trying to bring the best minds on both historical restoration and modernist architecture, which has that flowed out into the landscape. So the green spaces here are the places where we really want to get it right in restoration. The slate patio and the pool ground, the connection over to the barn, the glass barn and the landscape there, and this modernist cube of an entrance over here almost functions like an art gallery space onto itself. And so we would like to have our main office for the foundation to make our home from New Haven to Madison. And I'll say that will be a very light footprint. We are 2 full-time people, 2 part-time people. We mostly work remotely. You're having maybe one of us on site once a week or something like that. So light footprint on our office space. And then we'd like to live into some of these uses, like bring these things back to life. And I'll talk about that a little bit, but a lot around the art legacy, a lot around experiences on the site, small scale, perhaps invitation only to start. We're trying to be very conscious of this residential spot with access to the property and being good neighbors all at the same time, but also bringing back this architectural gem and something around art history. We think there's a lot to contribute there. So the yellow are the places like the main heart of the colonial house and the driveway and sort of this entryway. We could possibly restore those, but we're a little more flexible, and we're going through a whole parallel process with a set of architects and a design competition to get to a conceptual master plan that, of course, we would come back and keep sharing with you and neighbors and everything else. So this is very preliminary, and we're in generative thinking kind of mode. And then there are some spaces here where there's a guest house and a 3-car garage, and Peyton made an office here and a little bit of a parking off the driveway. These are not areas of particular architectural significance, so we could see some spaces for adaptation there. And I can just go in a little bit, some like, where might we have the guest? Where might we have the office? It could be in the footprint of where the guest house is. We're going to learn more from the architects too, really learn from them. But some of the early things we think, we want to have inspirational convening space, small scale, tours with architects and designers who are really going to care about this. Once they learn a glass barn of Philip Johnson is here, maybe when they're visiting the glass house, they're going to want to come over and see the barn and some of the modernist additions. We don't want to make it like a big open public, same kind of maybe traffic as the glass house, but more curated types of audiences who are coming. And we do want to look at some revenue generating opportunity too, so we can continue to support some of the philanthropic uses that will happen here. That really takes us to focusing on the office and the barn and some of the connected landscape and the slate patio for experiences there. Then I think we're probably looking at the main part of the colonial house and what could happen there. Could we have other nonprofit spaces? Could we have expanded gallery spaces? We support artists and curators. Could we have these small scale gallery exhibition type of uses that are happening there? And then just keep activating these spaces. We don't know, I know people are very concerned about traffic and maybe parking. There's not a huge amount of parking here, but I think we could have staff over here somewhere. And again, small scale. We've had suggestions from the neighbors. If we have anything a little bit larger scale, maybe we're doing a shuttle to get people in. There is a little access road over here on the north side of the barn off of Opening Hill Road. Could we do something like not impervious parking, but pervious parking in the sustainability lens if we needed to have some sort of on-site? Again, all things we would be living into and leaning into. And just back here in the yard, are we going to need additional septic or something like that? There's spaces for that, but we're just thinking, what could be. And I think like a far further off vision would be, would this be a place for an artist residency? Almost like a bed and breakfast type of situation for artists who, that we could support to do some residencies or creative residencies, maybe designers, writers, folks like that. Those are some of the sort of projected uses. And we've got guideposts that we want to live by: sustainable design, absolutely. That connection of the flow of indoor to outdoor space, and really thinking about accessibility. We focus on learning differences and neurodiversity and neuroinclusion. Could we be doing some things on this site that are net zero and maybe even net positive energy goals? What degree of innovation can we have there? Again, working with sustainable CT and art and renewable energy. I don't know. Sometimes these things can go together. And there's a whole concept around universal design for learning, and that actually came out of the architectural space. So we have a lot of connections there, and we want a lot of guidance. So you, of course, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the town, Shoreline Arts is already a grantee of ours, and so Eric Dillner has been a wonderful guide with us. There's a arborist who knows a lot about the property. Mike Ott actually helped do the subdivision with Pent Tremaine Jr., so there's a large history here. And again, we've done some outreach to the neighbors. And I just want to let you know quickly, we're trying to study what it means to activate space in a residential area becoming an architectural and cultural gem. But what that means, and we've done interviews with all of these folks, like trying to understand artist houses that then have become cultural heritage, artist residency types of destinations. The Albers Foundation, the Wolf House is a Philip Johnson house in New York. You may know about Manitoga, the Russell Wright Design Center. Again, these are in some rural places, some residential places. We're trying to learn from them. Joan Mitchell Foundation, Wharton Esherick, the Menil, much bigger footprint in Houston, but they still had some things to show us. Rauschenberg Foundation, artist residencies, Grace Farms, not too far down the road, but in sustainability and things like that. So I'll stop there. I'll hand it back to Chris, but that's some of the preliminary thinking, and really we are in learning and listening mode, but we just wanted to give you a little introduction. And Chris, can you talk more about the statement of use in its draft form?
Yeah. So I would imagine the commission members are like me after hearing all that and learning all that. You're sort of like, okay, how do I put my hands around this? And capture what I think would be a real benefit to the town, while at the same time not creating an opportunity for things to, or uses to occur, which are not what anybody wants. So, and I had some prior experience with something similar in connection with the effort by a local farm to create additional revenue, have different types of sort of non-agricultural uses occur on a farm, such as events or weddings, camps, things like that. And the section of our regulations relating to that, I think it's 3.11, if I'm remembering correctly. I was involved in drafting that regulation to allow farms to have certain uses that aren't typically associated with farming occur. And we confronted the same problem, how do we allow these things to happen that to some degree, all of us might agree that we'd like certain activities to happen, but how do we control them at the same time to not mushroom into things we don't want? So that regulation, you may be familiar with it, has a yearly requirement for an operational plan that the owner of a farm would have to submit each year and outline the activities, both agriculturally related and non-agriculturally related, that they wanted to do in a given year. And I think the uses that we've put into, let me stop there. The second thing I looked at was obviously what I often do. What other communities have been faced with a similar type of request to want to use a property in this way? And I found a really informative ordinance out of the town of Ossining, New York, that a lot of what you see, if you looked at the statement of use that I prepared, a lot of those controls and limitations are from a regulation out of Ossining, New York. And so we are planning to submit an application for special exception, because the philanthropic and educational uses are allowed in the RU1 zone where this property is, only by getting a special exception. As you also know, special exceptions by definition can and almost always do have conditions. So the use is something you may want to allow, but you want to condition that use or limit that use. The statement of use that I prepared was, again, a draft, but was designed to provide you with a framework on how, in what ways we can condition or limit the uses so that the community can enjoy this piece of our history, and at the same time have it coexist peacefully with the neighborhood and the neighbors. The it really is the goal of the foundation to have this be something that the community, both the neighboring community and the entire town, welcome and want and not fear. So that it was with that sort of backdrop that we put together the statement of use, which again would sort of serve as a framework upon which you as a commission for the benefit of the town and the neighbors can limit and control what's occurring here. So different from the farm use, though, the larger events, I don't believe are going to dominate the use here. This is much more about a foundation that's about to and desirous of spending real dollars to bring back something that needs to be brought back because these historically and architecturally significant structures have deteriorated and they need to be restored. And in order to justify the expenditure of that money, they'd like to know ahead of time that some of these uses that they want to put to the property can actually be legally done, again, under a special permit and subject to limitations and conditions. The statement of use was submitted in draft to you. Aaron had a couple of questions, one involving, are we going to have students or children being bused to the site? We had a visioning session last summer where we all met down at the Madison Beach Hotel for a couple of days, and we were brought to the site by a sort of corporate shuttle van, a small van, 13 passenger type van. And that was actually suggested by some of the neighbors who Michelle has spoken to already. I think that's a good idea, and I think it would be something we could do. But the number of events, and by events I'm talking, where there's more than 30 people, where there's people outdoors enjoying the landscape. I don't. The foundation's vision there is, a couple a year, maybe. In the beginning years, 2024, 2025, there will be likely none, or maybe one for a fundraiser as they, break ground. But I would imagine these events of that magnitude would be less frequency than even the weddings that occur on farms. They have a wedding season, and the event that, they want to make money on weddings during wedding season. I don't see this use as being nearly as intensive as that. And again, the idea is to do the more everyday type use that the foundation is visioning here is people coming, having lectures, discussions about art, architecture, sustainability, meetings of nonprofits who share similar mission statements and goals. And I believe that type of activity on the site can occur and would do so in almost a less intensive way than a busy family would on the site. And we're trying to make sure that the uses that are allowed are going to be very respectful and meet with any of the concerns of the neighbors, so that with that, I'd like to stop talking. And I don't know if there's any people who attended the discussion. I know Michelle spoke to neighbors, and the idea of tonight really was to get feedback from the commission and anyone else from the community who would like to voice an opinion before we prepare our special exception application, which we're going to do in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Attorney McKeon and Michelle, I feel obligated to say, just for full disclosure, that I retired from the Yale University Art Gallery in 2019, where I was deputy chief conservator. I've been involved in the conservation of cultural heritage for over 40 years. And after I left Yale, I went to the island of Lanai in Hawaii to set up an outdoor sculpture program. So you may not realize that the chair of your commission actually is well-versed in what you're talking about. So I just wanted to get that out there. I don't know if anyone else wants to respond in any way. You know, it's a very interesting project. I guess I also want to clarify, you are a 501(c), so you're a nonprofit?
Correct. And, you know, I foresee, we've done this when we've been in other places where we do local grant making. We know it kind of takes a property off the tax rolls, and that's of concern. We intend to do some local grant making that would more than make up for that, and also just, you know, kind of help with probably align things that are conservation, preservation, art, culture, education aligned. But yes, we are a private foundation, but all within the 501(c)(3) umbrella.
Is my presumption, my understanding correct, that your goal is to create a commercial enterprise as part of this? Is that my understanding correct?
We would call it would be revenue generating opportunities that would be in support of the nonprofit and philanthropic uses. So if we did a fundraiser or something like that, if we had an art stay or something like that, that any revenue generated would be completely going back to philanthropic uses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you plan to keep the acreage intact? Because I think it was subdividable.
To keep the property intact, the 6-acre parcel that is there now, we would plan to keep that intact.
And the Neck River goes right through it?
It does, and in fact, we're a little bit of the properties in Guilford, so we kind of straddle the line right there, and we're really interested in the wetlands and what can be done through a sustainability lens to, you know, kind of enhance or protect the wetlands.
Well, it sounds very interesting, very exciting. Mike Ott, would you like to say anything about the site, or, you know, the issues with wetlands and topography?
Good evening. Just for the record, I'm Mike Ott. I'm a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor here in Madison with an office on Wall Street. Just to expand a little bit on the Neck River, there's the river channel proper, you know, flows through the site, as Michelle said. There's also a branch channel. If you look at the survey, I think Michelle's bringing up now, there's a branch channel that flows up along, might be a little hard to see, but it flows up along the property line, kind of up and down the sheet along the southerly, I think it would be, property line. So, and there's, I believe just downstream, there's a trail system of the land trust also along the Neck River. So the site is partially wooded and partially lawn. There's quite a large lawn area, you know, behind the buildings in the rear of the site. The lawn is relatively flat, but the grade rises up to the east, I guess it would be. I can't see the north arrow, but I think I have my directions right. To the north, I'm sorry. So the grade rises up to the north at the rear of the property, fairly significantly. It's a beautiful site, especially on a sunny day. It's a very pretty site.
Thank you.
I wanted to I guess emphasize a point about what one of the commissioners just said about this land being subdividable. The very mission statement of the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation is and if I were a neighbor or I were concerned about this use sort of spiraling out of control in some way, their mission statement here will be to preserve these architecturally significant structures. There are no immediate plans to build new structures. And were they to do that down the road, it would be through a modification of a special permit were one to be granted and a site plan approval. But the idea here is to restore these historic and architecturally significant structures and use them in a way to further the mission of the foundation that would be philanthropic and educational. So for surrounding neighbors, I think they can take some comfort in the fact that the very mission statement of the owner, and given the history, I think it is very likely that this foundation will own this property for an awfully long time, that and coupled with, if a special permit were to be granted, coupled with a reasonable set of limitations that that the commission can control with input from the public based on experience as they unfold the various activities that they would like to do at the site. I do believe there's a way to make everybody happy if that's ever possible. And that's what we will be seeking to do with our application and through the public hearing process. But we wanted to expose you and the community to these plans at this point. And I don't know if there are, if the chair wants to allow people who might have tuned in to ask questions or not. I know it's not a public hearing, but
Our commissioner question, Bob Reinhardt.
Sorry, I'm at the end, you can't hear me unless I yell. So I think it's great. I like the way it was presented, the idea. You mentioned that it has a benefit to the town. I'm still struggling a little bit to see what a tangible benefit might be. Benefit of restoring a home and the land, all that is great. Reputational is good, but I'm not sure I see a tangible benefit to the town other than that. So a lot of intangibles, which is good. But going through I pulled it up again, so I looked at it before, the project description, statement of use. The statement of use in some of the sections seems somewhat more expansive than what you've been describing. So I just want to make sure we get that clear during the process. Just how many bedrooms were you thinking of for the site? And I'm not trying to do it, I've got you, so here's why I'm asking that. You had residence for employees as part of the statement of use, temporary residences for artists, long-term experiential type things, like basically like a B&B or an Airbnb associated with that, and a service kitchen. So that to me sounds, it's getting big. I don't know how big the site is now. And it's not questions you need to answer now, but it's something that I want to make sure we address as we go into the process.
That's great feedback. There are currently 6 bedrooms in the house, in the guest house. And again, we're living into this with you, with the town. So I think we were trying to put all the possible intended uses into this draft statement. So everyone could see, like, what would the philanthropic uses hold? And then the notion of the annual plan can be what we would come forward with, like an early on, like, would we do 5 architectural tours? Would we do, 4 gallery walks, an exhibition, and have that come to you, an annual operating plan and 1 fundraiser or something like that early, and whether this becomes a site where there are artist residencies is still way up in the air. And I know sometimes that it feels vague and it feels unknown. So I know that can be uncomfortable, but I think everyone sort of needs to live into this space. We've learned that with some of the other architectural and arts and cultural spaces that we interviewed. Like, they had to get to know the neighbors, understand, kind of feel into what's the appropriate scale of activity here, what are the impacts on traffic and noise and safety and all those things. and grow into that. So if it became a place that was trusted for these kinds of lighter touch activities that didn't feel invasive, would there be in the out years an annual operating plan that would come to you that would start to include maybe a small, 4 artists, one time a year or something like that? Feel into that. Is that working for people? And again, come back in another year to see if there's support in the community, in the town for that to be a larger operation or not. And then I think that notion of the annual operating plan becomes a really great dialogue tool between the foundation and neighbors in the town about, what kind of asset does this become to the town and the neighborhood?
Yeah, I could add to that too. In the coming weeks, as we prepare the final application, we're going to spend some time to request the uses from the commission by way of a special permit that are the least possible number of uses that we can to justify the significant expenditure that the foundation is going to make. For instance, I suppose we can consider removing certain aspects of what are in my statement of use and have them be by way of further modification down the road. And that my statement of use was really designed to kind of put it all out there and show you that they're, even if they were allowed, that they can be controlled by the commission through conditions and other aspects of that statement of use. So, but we will very much refine what we intend to submit for instance, for the years 2024 and 25, there's going to be very little activity other than restoration. Again, assuming they get the ability to put the property to these some basic philanthropic uses. For instance, the location of their very low intensity office, some gallery type uses, small gatherings of lectures of people interested in the site and perhaps furthering the mission. To me, those seem very low intensity and probably could be conducted on that site without anyone even knowing they're occurring. But technically it is a residentially zoned property. So even those small, less intensive uses cannot technically legally be done without the special exception permit. So we will be working on refining the request and, larger, or I guess more significant changes of use from what's there now can be left to further modifications of a permit down the road.
Yeah, and just a little additive, like, in the beginning, I said we're a 40-year-old family foundation. We've been doing grant making in these 3 strategic program areas. We're not abandoning that either. So this is just something that we're just wading into and understanding. And so we're on our own journey about resource portfolio balancing across 3 program areas and then philanthropic uses that would be programmed on the site.
This is Jeff Downs. I just have a question. You talked about revenue generating events, and then somebody mentioned commercial. I'm just wondering, is there a line that differentiates between commercial and if you were to have events, how does that play into the use of the property as it's residential?
It's just more, it's not it wouldn't be a for-profit business venture. Like, I don't know, just say.
Is your 501c3 classification?
Correct. So, yeah.
Erin, where is the town in its process about Airbnbs?
It's not moving forward.
It's not moving forward.
It hasn't moved forward. There were conversations last spring about that, and the Board of Selectmen held off on drafting any formal regulations. Let it go through the summer. We didn't receive any formal complaints on properties regarding short-term rentals, and it hasn't come up.
Okay, yeah, because I thought it was sort of in the works and it would be good to have that taken care of, I think, first before we hear about Airbnbs from this property, but it's not going anywhere.
Correct, we don't have
Attorney McCann, do you know?
regulations.
I don't, but Michelle and I had the discussion before the meeting about the concern and I obviously know what the short-term rental issues are across the country. But this property, the Airbnb is not in the future of this property. The residencies here would be more art related, architecture related people. Somebody who's going to lecture a group on 1 or 2 days in a row might stay there. It could be that somebody wants to spend a weekend surrounded by Philip Johnson's work and walk in the barn where these priceless pieces of art spent a lot of time. It does not strike the same chord with me as an Airbnb where you have this, constant changing of families living in a spot and the issues associated with that. And again, I think that those types of stays, and you bring up bed and breakfast. Interestingly, bed and breakfasts are permitted in this zone, subject to certain limitations. The 4 beds, 25% of the floor area, and that use isn't even requiring a special exception. It's just a zoning permit to show that you're complying with the various provisions in the regulation. So, and again, given the size of the existing structures, there's 6 bedrooms there. If we're going to build more bedrooms, we would need to come to you and we would need to comply with not only site plans, but probably modifying a special exception permit. So, and again, I'm not sort of advocating the application yet, but I think I guess I'd like to let everybody know there are ways to address the concerns with appropriate conditions and limitations. And that's really the task of us to try to convince you that that can be done in ways it can be done. But it was one of the other reasons we wanted to get you thinking about it before we actually filed the application.
Thanks. You mentioned that 2 staff would be working there. Will anyone be living there?
Full-time?
Not on staff, no, not at this time. And we only have 2 full-time people, 2 part-time people, and we mostly work remotely. So it would be like maybe one of our staff people coming once a week, perhaps. We do have, security cameras. We know there's concern about that. We have a property manager. As things would progress, we would make sure we are addressing, need for security and all those things. But no staff would be living there at this time. In the future, if we need like a program manager to be there, I don't know, we'd come back and certainly consider that, but it's just not intended in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I think, the more specific you can be in your application, the better, obviously, for us and
Yeah.
for neighbors to know what we're really.
Yeah, I would be encouraging you to show all the activities you have in mind, the frequency of those activities, and enumerate as much value as you can to the town of Madison as part of all of it.
Great.
Did you want
Yeah,
to allow if
do you
somebody
want
had a question?
We've got
preliminarily?
3
When they
people
showed-
here.
When they showed you the site plan,
Could you just identify
oh
yourself
yeah,
and your,
Bruce Lockhart, 24 Indigo Trail,
thanks.
when they, 12 acres were divided, I bought 6 acres. So when they show you the site plan, my property abuts in the back. For 20 years, I've worked on that house to help Pete Patterson. She was a divorced woman. I know the structure inside and out. When she went bankrupt, I contacted the Glass House National Trust, including a billionaire, Lyon, who collects 25 empty houses. And I said, we should not just have this structure destroyed.
It has historical significance. It's in books of architecture. So I was trying to rescue the house from the Bank of America. They even made an offer to buy it. Another neighbor made an offer to buy it. So along comes the Tremaine Foundation with $100 million. Okay. And the proposal that I've read that the lawyer put together, and all the neighbors in the neighborhood are, we've worked a long time in our lives, me from the ghetto of New Haven, to finally get to this point in life. Where did it go from the Tremaines trying to save grandma and grandpa's house, which is beautiful when you have that kind of money that you can step back and rescue something, to a commercial art gallery that's going to import people. There's no parking space except on our street. There's talking about having functions that go to 11 o'clock at night from 8 o'clock in the morning with as many as 50 people coming in. They're talking about other foundations utilizing this site as basically a party site, because there's a lot of foundations in Connecticut that don't have actual buildings. They give their money, like this organization has done, which is beautiful. I applaud it, for years by working out of an office. So as you know, if you can put money into similar foundations, this is going to evolve into a constant site of cocktail parties, of lectures are fine, but cocktail parties, events, generating money. And this is a residential neighborhood. Also, this will come off your tax rolls, which is about $25,000 a year. So what is the benefit to the town, but what is the benefit to the people who spend 20 or 30 years in this neighborhood? What's going to happen to our home values? Would you buy a home where every weekend or 12 times a year or 15 times a year, there's an event going on? Fine, save the house. Fine, take the artwork, bring it back to the house. The Tremaine Foundation, the Tremaine family, all the board members, or most of the board members are the Tremaine family. Great. Do it. Fix the house. Put the artwork in there. But why turn it into this commercial enterprise? What is the goal here? If you want to teach artists or subsidize artists in their apartments, New Haven, New York, fine. Now you want to bring artists in to live, to subsidize them. This is not what the residents of this town bought into. And we spent a lot of time in life trying to get to this point to live in this town. This is not what we signed in for.
We hear you, and I think that that's why it's really important to get as much detail as we can
About the activities they do.
and the functions.
But who is going to monitor the activities? If we call the police every Saturday night or every Friday night, which they want to have up to 11 o'clock at night, that's just the end of the activities. Then you have the caterers breaking down the tents, washing the dishes, loading their trucks. The noise, as you know, in the wintertime, but even in the summertime, comes right through the whole neighborhood. When Peyton Patterson had those events, the whole neighborhood, everything that was going on. So are you going to look at this 12 events every year? And are you going to tell a $100 million foundation what they can have and what they can't have? And then are you going to send the police to these events and say, okay, shut it down? This is a residential neighborhood. There should be not any exemption to putting this type of enterprise in a residential neighborhood.
We need to know exactly what it is, I think. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Ed Rizzo, live at 28 Kachina Way. So I obviously reiterate everything Bruce just said. I don't take any comfort in what Chris has just stated about, obviously, because Chris is not a neighbor who would have to deal with the potential impacts of this. We've lived there for about 8 years. I have 2 children. My wife all lived there. We moved here from New York City to get away to live in a more neighborhood community. That's why we bought our home. That's why we invested in it heavily. The fact that that's even being contemplated to put a revenue generating business, whether it's philanthropic or otherwise, has no bearing. But if any one of you of interest to somebody who decided to run an Airbnb or a restaurant, I saw the word cafe, wedding venue, it has no place in an RU environment. There's no shortage of commercially available properties that could be zoned and used for this reason, and there's no reason why we would need to zone or make any exception to the way it currently is laid out. I see no benefit to the town. I certainly see no benefit as a neighbor. So we're strongly opposed to it and want to make sure that everybody hears our feedback. And we'll certainly be writing up some more information so that everybody can understand the specifics of our complaint.
Can neighbor have all the neighbors been
Oh, I
spoken
just,
to, hold, not?
I just found out that, so, I mean, literally, from the foundation, I received a letter. I had no understanding that any of this was going on. I've heard that there's already been visionings and that something's been, forwarded to the commission. We as neighbors had no understanding that any of this was going on. I literally learned about it, I think, a day or two.
No, they sent you a letter, right?
Sent me a letter,
Put in
yeah.
the letter.
And that's what this is an informal, a request for an informal. There's no
Yeah. Oh,
application
absolutely.
and nothing
Correct.
has happened
Correct.
with the commission,
Correct.
aside from,
And
you
we've
know,
all seen
any,
the same things you.
Okay, yeah, I was
any
just,
visioning that the
I was
the
shocked, I was
foundation
just,
has done.
I was just
Yeah, we weren't.
shocked to see that an application was even being proposed in a residential area that comprised the type of activities that were out here. I was shocked.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand what you were saying about the statement of work and all possible uses so we can get out there. I don't, that's probably a very, in my opinion, it's very exhaustive list. I would almost, you're gonna bring this exception regardless. I get that, at least in my opinion. I would rather see very specific, what are you really gonna do here? Not hyperbole. Maybe we'll do this. I don't envision that. I don't see this. I don't know about that. Maybe we can do this. I think you come in and say, this is what we're planning to do. And you stick to that. And then it is monitored if it's even going to be allowed. I mean, again, I live in a neighborhood where Airbnb thing that scares the crap out of me, quite frankly. I've been here, almost 35 years, and I've got a big investment too. So I see it. I get it. But you're allowed to bring these. It's a viable option. Maybe, but I think it has to be very contained in what it's used for. And again, I don't see it. I mean, if it turns into a wedding venue, then yeah, I don't want that in my backyard either.
Literally what it says.
So I know I read it. So again, I think that's again while we're talking.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you
Your
guys.
input.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for hearing us.
That's what we're here
That's,
for.
we can do it in an informal setting like this, when it's a public hearing, it's a different story, but there we go. So thank you all for coming and starting the conversation.
We appreciate your allowing us to share some ideas and have this discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
We kind of thrive on idea generation and the feedback is really important and helpful. So thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you.
To be continued. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
You too.
You too, thank you.
Take care.
Okay, so we have pending applications listed on our agenda, which we have tabled or granted extensions. Erin, I don't think we really need to run through all of these.
For pending, no, it's self-explanatory.
And even though March 21st looks like a
Yes, it is.
a loaded meeting, I think a lot of these will go pretty quickly. And then we have on receipt 885 Boston Post Road, which is the former Elizabeth Cafe. They're coming back with a modification to a previous special exception permit that was approved. So we need to schedule that public hearing for March 21st. Then
We know what the use is, like.
It's
a document.
It's a physical therapist office.
Office.
That's who's purchasing the property. So instead of a restaurant on the first floor and 2 residential units, they're proposing to use the entire building for their business.
Oh.
And then there's some minor facade changes.
pretty minor.
Really eliminating the open porch and Otherwise, the majority of the site that you've seen already,
It was
and all the materials and the
It's
look of the
retained.
building is the same.
So can I have a motion that we put that on our schedule for the public hearing for March 21st? Any further discussion? In favor? March 21st. And then 2222 Durham Road, subdivision application that I need a motion on the agenda for April 18th. Nick, did you want to say anything about it, Erin? I'm sorry.
No inland wetlands on the property, which is why we're
Holding it
pushing it
out.
out to allow the wetlands agency to have time next month to comment.
Second.
It's a beautiful.
Especially today, especially this morning. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, I think we're good. That moves us on to the proposed text amendment. Which, that's also scheduled for March 21st.
Right, we went over this last time, minor changes to be in compliance with the statutes
Right.
that changed.
Great. In that case, I'll turn the approval of meetings over to our secretary. Who's that?
Sure. February 15th meeting, members present, Snow, Russo, Ruben, Barnhart, Budda, Paul, O'Connor, and Morgan. So motion for approval. A second. All right. Any comments, edits, or suggestions? I didn't see any. Thank you. I'll vote to approve. All in favor? Great.
Great, thank you. Okay, any remarks? I have none. Erin? I have a motion to adjourn. Second. Discussion, all in favor? We're adjourned at 9:04, I believe it is.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye.
Guys, good meeting.